All right, and welcome into another episode of the Buffalo Basement Podcast. I am your host, Matt Digert, always joined by Pat Bruckness here on my right, and you'll see at the bottom. We'll give him a couple seconds to kind of introduce himself here in a second. But we have Kevin from the Cover One Network, and let's start off. And I'll give Kevin his couple seconds here to go forward.
Yeah, appreciate you guys having me on tonight. As you always, you can find me on Tuesdays with Mike Bunt, the Going Deep podcast on the Cover One Sports Network. We break down everything possible. We have some great guests and just always love talking Bills any day of the week. So happy to be here. Happy to talk about the topic and bring great info to the viewers of the basement.
Well, I definitely appreciate you hopping on, Kevin. Real quickly, I do want to just let everybody know we are presented by Sons of Erie. Definitely check them out for any of you. A couple nice pieces of art. I know, Kevin, you bought something from them personally.
Yeah, I do.
Definitely go check them out at sonsoferie.com. And definitely check them out and see if you can't find anything you like. With that being said, let's kind of get into some Bills talk here. We did find out on Tuesday the majority of all of the cuts for the 53-man roster. We did get some news yesterday with the signing of Ifedi and Christian Kirksey to the practice squad. Ifedi going on the main 53-man roster. Let's start off with that. How do you feel about Ifedi, first and foremost, Kevin?
He's an exciting player. I think you see just a steady presence at the right tackle position. Really hasn't been great at guard in his career. You see him as a one position type of guy, so that's what's caused him to bounce around in a league where the Bills are already rostering like Alec Anderson, Tommy Doyle before his injury. You have Ryan Bates, just guys that play 3 to 4 spots, and that's really where the league's going. They've tried different spots with Ryan Vandemark. He's more of a pure left tackle. He's been really good at the left tackle spot. But he's getting used to right tackle. So I think with Ifedi, you get the pure right tackle. Probably can't do too much else, but really will bring you a steady pass blocking presence from the right tackle, maybe kind of opposite of what Spencer Brown's going to do. So they're kind of really good opposites, attract kind of personalities. I think Spencer Brown's significantly better against the run or blocking in the run game and run fits. And we'll see how that all plays out between the two of them. If Spencer Brown can even be adequate at pass blocking this year, which we're hoping for, he's just more of a depth piece, but we'll see early on if there's problems with Spencer Brown, he can come in and play. They really had high hopes from what I heard inside the team. They had really high hopes for Brandon Shell. And really was, everyone's like, what was the solution at right tackle? The Bills thought they had one of the better offensive linemen, as funny as that sounds, on the Miami Dolphins last year. Their offensive line was much better with Shell in the lineup. And the Bills were hoping for the same type of thing. So that did kind of catch him by surprise. I'm not sure if his heart wasn't in it, what happened there. But Ifedi is a similar type of veteran presence who's been good in stretches, regardless of what other team fans might say. He's been good. And you're talking about it. Really the Bills' 8th offensive lineman here. You're not talking about a guy you're coming in to be, the best guy in the line or anything. So he's as good as depth comes, and it's a good addition for September 1st. So that's realistically what you're looking for out of Ifedi and what he's should be able to shore up a really nice piece of a pretty good looking offensive line. We'll see if they put it together.
Well, and that's one of the things I'm glad you brought up, depth. Before we touch on Christian Kirksey here real quick, but that's one of the things that I've found that they've really tried to do is upgrade their depth pieces all throughout the offseason. Whether it be Hardy, Sherfield, or, adding Kincaid, even though he's not like depth, he is going to tend to start, but he does give them that piece behind Dawson Knox on your 10 or 11 personnel, when you're going through those type of things. But what are your feelings on Christian Kirksey at this point?
Same type of deal. It is very similar, but just at the linebacker position, 2 spots where the Bills were looking to upgrade, and Bills fans specifically were interested to see what would go down there. And, here at Cover One, we put out some film on Kirksey. Same type of deal. He's steady regardless of what their fan bases have said. He signed a couple of big deals recently. That's why the Texans decided to move on from him. That wasn't a play type of thing. That was we're getting younger. We don't know if we can spend the $5 to $6 million cap hit there. His cap hit was starting to climb here. And he got a 2-year, $10 million extension 2 years ago, and this is the second year of it. The Texans went a different route with their linebacking position, which, makes sense to where they are. They're going extremely young. It's not a terrible idea on their end too as well. I mean, going to Denzel Perryman, I don't know how I feel about that over there. Between him and Blake Cashman and Christian Harris and Corey Littleton is not quite my favorite linebacking core in the league. But I think that was more of a pure, everyone is going to stick to the youth movement. But that was a pure cap cut. Bills have been there in their past when they were rebuilding. You just can't afford someone like Kirksey. He's put out some really good film. Last year was a little rougher, kind of going through the motions that you don't really think that's him as a player. Got some film of him jogging around, some stuff that I don't want to see from a linebacker. But man, he has it going on. He's a steady vet. I'm going to imagine the Bills said that he would come in immediately. I think that probably had to do with the AJ Klein cut. The Bills kind of probably knew they were close to signing him. And he's an upgrade from Klein. He's an upgrade from Dodson. Can he beat out Bernard? That remains to be seen. I think the Bills should go with Bernard early and often. And if he struggles by that time, go roll with Christian Kirksey. But right now he's on the practice squad. I expect to see him there for a couple of weeks. We'll see how quickly they bring him up. The first sign of problem, they'll bring him up. At the cost of who, though, guys? So how does he get to the active roster? It might have to be Terrell Dodson. It might have to be Dodson coming off the roster, which I predicted him to not make my 53. I only got 3 wrong on my projection. And I think that the process here is to roster Kirksey sooner rather than later. The problem with Dodson, guys, his contract's fully guaranteed. Bean kind of tried to go in there at a low ball offer, but in return gave it to him basically fully guaranteed. Yeah. So that was kind of the issue with what they tried to do there. The Bills knew they had a 3rd-round pick that they were going to develop and another 3rd-round pick coming in. At some point, you got to hand the job over to one of your middle-round picks.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, as far as Kirksey goes, I mean, you got both. Poyer was there in Cleveland when he was there. Al Holcomb on the coaching staff was on there, and he went to school with Micah Hyde too. So not only does he have those voices in the room, if Brandon Beane, wanted to go to them and find out some more information, he has those. And I'm sure they were, advocates for him potentially coming in. And, we all saw it during the preseason. Dodson looked completely lost, like every single time he was out there. And they needed to at least upgrade or get a quality backup if they were going to go with Bernard, just in case something were to happen throughout the season or Bernard wasn't working out in the first few weeks, so you could at least keep the defense together. And that's one of the things I noticed from, watching Cover One, their videos that you guys put out, is he sets the defense very, very well. He is very, very smart in those defenses. So can you speak to anything on those things that you have seen, specifically on the field more than anything else?
Yeah, he's really good at backer force, which means he's setting the edge, which means it's his positional strength to have to come up and make a play. So backer force is the guy that holds contain. And when you see him in true backer force, he's very good at it. He's a strong presence. He comes with a lot of pedigree. He's been good. He's great in Cleveland. So he has a lot of good film out there. Kind of struggled a little bit later in his career with some bad teams. He really hasn't been on. He was on a Green Bay team that came off and gave him a bunch of money. So actually that he did visit the Bills and like the day before COVID shut down the entire country. He was in Buffalo on a free agent visit. And then from there, everybody knows what happened there worldwide, but he just determined to go to Green Bay at that stage. I think it was just a weird place in time for him then. And the Bills have been kind of watching over him since. He hasn't really been free since then. He's always been on the higher end of what Brandon Beane wants to spend. He's always kind of been like age to money ratio hasn't necessarily been there until now. I would think that he was probably someone the Bills were looking for back when they went with AJ Klein originally. And they went with a couple of other names there that the Bills probably would have loved to have him in the room, still would have been behind their 2 starters. So that could have been it for Kirksey too at the time. You got Matt Milano and Tremaine Edmonds. You're not going to earn those 2 for $11 million that he was getting elsewhere playing behind them without an injury. So he's finally, in my opinion, ready to chase championships. He's on a $370,000 deal. So that proves to me that he is what he says he is. I don't know. We'll see if there's reports that come out that he could have played on a lesser team. I don't even know whether that'd be true or not at this stage. But he did chase for a low-end contract. And if he does get called up, he's still only $1 million player for $1 million check for as long as he's on the active roster. But for a guy that signed a 4-year, $38 million deal just a few years ago, 2 for $13 the year the Bills wanted him in 2020, 2021, and then one for $3 million as a 2021. And then from there played well enough to get a 2 for 10. So he's always been on the higher end of the Bills, just not being able to say that's the right fit for us, even though they've been after him. And the scheme fit, especially now with Al Holcomb, he's a natural fit. He won't take long to learn this defense. I'm still rooting for Terrell Bernard personally. I think that's the right move. But I think that he could come in immediately, maybe knock Dotson into special teams. If there's a single injury, he's probably going to come in for it, regardless of what position it's at, and like receiver, then the Bills will have to make a move. But other than that, mostly across the roster, he'll come in at the first IR situation the Bills have this season, and they'll get back to 6 linebackers, probably pushing Dotson and Matakevich, obviously to special teams duty, and probably Dorian Williams too. So that's what will happen, but I expect him to be called up against the Jets, if not absolutely against the Raiders.
Actually, what I was just going to ask you is I was going to ask you, like, do you think he gets called up as one of the call-ups in week 1 to, back up, Bernard and Dodson, or Dodson and Bernard, whoever, as far as that goes. And, as far as the 53-man roster goes, I'm so excited for this year, because it's not only just we have, star players. When you have somebody that needs a breath, needs a blow, needs to do whatever, they can bring somebody in that is going to, whether it be Sherfield, we saw that in the preseason which surprised me, is his hands. His hands in traffic is really, really good. Hopefully Josh doesn't put him in those situations where he gets killed like Allen did in the Kyle Allen did in the Colts game. But I really feel as though that those guys are going to be really good on offense and bring another depth to this team. With that being said, how do you feel about what won Alec Anderson and Vandemark the job over, let's say, Quesenberry or any of the other guys that were on the team?
One thing not talked about enough is not as much as Dodson, but the Bills did the same thing with Quesenberry and said, here's $1.2 million. It's yours, regardless if you make the roster. And it's not that crazy of an amount, but think about that. That's still it's more or less a guaranteeing a roster spot to Quesenberry. To move away from him, you have to pay him that plus whatever Alec Anderson costs to roster. So they liked Alec Anderson enough to not only give a roster spot to, but go above $2 million roughly against their cap to do so. So to me, I love the versatility. You saw Alec Anderson go in before Ryan Vandemark in the preseason game to get those right tackle reps. I think that you'll see Anderson in a lot of situations if there's injuries. Bills are super deep here, guys. I know it's funny to say, it hasn't been great lately. More or less, it hasn't been great because Roger Saffold stunk. So that aside, and even Roger Saffold was looked at very highly by his peers. I mean, been in the league a long time, been on a few Super Bowls. It just was what it was with him. But, you really saw the biggest thing here. Spencer Brown should not have played, by all accounts and all my sources. Spencer Brown should not have played last season. It only really hurt his stock. I wish we were talking about Spencer Brown coming off of a pretty bad back injury and more being the rookie Spencer Brown and the potential Spencer Brown, than having this stigma of some of his play last year. I mean, he was basically he was reaching, he was trying to do anything he could to make up for that back injury. But you're seeing more of that punch. And you're seeing him more being left on an island in the preseason to see how he could handle certain pass rushers. He's definitely going to get some help when needed by the running back. The Bills don't leave the tight end to block. They didn't under Dable at all. We'll see in 12 personnel, just naturally, that's not true anymore with Dorsey. So the one thing you saw, what you mentioned, Kyle Allen, Quentin Morris isn't a very good blocker. And that's why I wanted to leave him off of my roster. But he made some plays in camp and he made that touchdown that I think earned him a roster spot. So that's ultimately what we had to remember about this 12 personnel. I truly think they wanted a better blocking tight end, but Quentin Morris forced their hand with definitely being a guy that would get claimed if was exposed to waivers. So I'm excited to see Alec Anderson. I don't know where he cracks the lineup. I don't think you'll see, somebody's got to be inactive from that group now with Ifedi.
Yeah. And, what are your feelings on, Vandemark? Where is he kind of slotted? Because I'm a big fan of what the Bills have done throughout that offensive line is, basically any of the guys on the line, at least depth pieces, are interchangeable pretty much. Like you got Ryan Bates, who technically can play all 5 positions. Alec Anderson has been in there. He can play basically all 5 positions. Vandemark can play, left and right tackle. And, where do you see like Vandemark and Alec Anderson maybe in the future on this team?
Yeah, I think you would see there's 10 offensive linemen. And I think you would see ideally each of them slot to one of their best positions, even with the versatility. You would like to see Brian Vandemark if something happens to Deion Dawkins in a game, because that's where he's been the best. Now, is that realistic with 7 inactives on game day? Not really, because now you're going to have position versatility between your guys. You can't just have, the challenge is, you want to roster Bates. You want to have David Edwards available. So there's 2 interior guys generally right there. So what are you going to do? You can only have either Vandemark, Alec Anderson, or Ifedi really active on game days. Now they could get a little fancy and go 9. I don't see it with the way their roster is built. I don't think they can go that heavy there with where they have other players. Maybe while Vaughn is out, maybe with a couple of other things, but I don't know how they can go 9 offensive linemen in many games. So they're going to have to pick between Vandemark, Ifedi, and Alec Anderson. So it's tough to me. I think that would rule out Anderson on game days, I think. And you're going to have to pick your swing tackle. I think right now it's Ryan Vandemark. He's been in the system. He's more of a seamless left tackle. Do they trust him enough at right, and vice versa? Do they trust Ifedi enough to come in for Dawkins if something happens? When I just said Ifedi's really a solid right tackle, don't know how much I trust him on the left side. So they got to make that decision. And maybe they do have to go 9 and put both of them in Alex, the odd man out early on. It's going to be interesting how they kind of maneuver the active game day roster, which is already a shallow roster in terms of 53 men. I wish they would get rid of the inactives, but they have to balance out injuries. If the team gets bitten by an injury bug, they have to balance that out with inactives. It is only fair. Otherwise, you're going to get a crazy IRing situation, kind of like you see in baseball. So you kind of want to avoid that and go with the 7 inactives. And the new quarterback rule, guys, I don't know how that plays a role. If the guy's on your practice squad, can he be elevated for free? It's gonna, I don't know the intricacies of the 3rd quarterback rule that they brought back from like 20 years ago. So it's going to be interesting to see if the Bills you're going to automatically call up a quarterback because it's a free call. I don't really know how that's going to play. And obviously we saw the news today, of picking Shane Buechele over from Kansas City, a guy that looked good all preseason. He's been stashed by Andy Reid for a while now. So how does that play a role in all these game day inactives with the offensive linemen? We're going to find out sooner rather than later.
So you brought up the quarterback, and I want to let Pat get his 2 cents in here real quickly, because I know he's got a couple questions on the backup quarterback or the practice squad quarterback, and after that we'll start touching on the defensive line now.
Yeah, because I was just curious, can you tell us a little bit about the backup quarterback we brought in, the practice squad quarterback?
Yeah, he's kind of been a master of improv. Like you saw a really great play in the preseason where he kind of looked Mahomes-like, kind of studied from him and made a ridiculous play against the Saints in the preseason. Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes style. So you see a little bit of everything out of Buechele. He's kind of a risk taker, throws some interceptions in preseason that we saw. He'll fit the ball in there. And that's what I think Andy Reid liked about him. Like you live with the interceptions from these guys. If he ever had to come in a game, obviously you might try to rein that in when you're trying to win a football game. But really to go out there and show your talents, he's an interesting talent. I didn't realize he didn't choose to sign with the Chiefs. I just figured he's usually their 2nd or 3rd quarterback over there, usually behind a vet, and he's probably sick of it. He's probably like, if I'm just going to keep losing to Blaine Gabbert, whoever, Chad Henne, whoever is in, they rostered him all last year as the 3rd quarterback for much of that. He was on their roster for the whole season. He wasn't on the practice squad. So they felt enough that he would get claimed at that point to not expose him. And the Bills have had to make that decision with other players too, Isaiah Hodgins. But he's talented enough, and he must have seen enough to go to our practice squad here in Buffalo and be behind Kyle Allen. And instead of sitting behind Patrick Mahomes and obviously Blaine Gabbert. So it was an interesting decision by him, one where the Bills probably reached out and were like, dude, you have a direct path, and if you're good next year, you are our QB2. It's probably pretty enticing to him. And, why would they ever make that swap between Kyle and Shane Buechele? They probably wouldn't make the roster swap right now. But if anything happens and Allen has to go in and doesn't look good, I'd expect a Shane Buechele call up at some point recently. So we'll see how that plays. But clearly he chose to be here. He probably had options across the league. He's looked good enough. And this is the first time he's been exposed to waivers in a long time. So he played 3 years in the league now. So the Bills are pretty excited to have him. And he's an improv guy. Like, he makes throws. He's not afraid to make them. He runs an offense. He runs a pretty good screen game. I don't know if that's because of Andy Reid. But he looks good in the screen, but sells it pretty well. So it's pretty exciting to see him, come here. And a guy I didn't consider because I didn't even think he would leave the Andy Reid system. So that was why I did not. I saw his name get cut earlier. I listened to Chiefs people, whether across the league, and they made it seem like Gabbert and Buechele was a really good 2-3 combo. And they went with Gabbert. So we're going to see exactly what the plan is for him. And it's very intriguing that he chose the Bills over other conceivably many other practice squads.
Go ahead, Pat.
No, and I was going to say, you did say that you don't see them making a switch this year to where Shane could possibly be quarterback 2.
I don't know what the world we live in where that happens. That would have to be a Kyle Allen goes in and looks terrible situation. I don't know that we'll see that. Nor do I want to see that. So no, not offhand, but in a situation where anything happens, I guess either of them, Buechele would get called up instantly. He's agreed to stay in the practice squad. I'm assuming he doesn't want to come and learn this offense only to go sign with the Jags or something like that. So conceivably that's not good for a quarterback, because even if they get a game over there as a number 2, I mean, you're not going to be productive. So that's the one position you can kind of trust that they stay. So I do think it would take an injury to one of those two guys. Or maybe someone tries to pluck him and the Bills are like, shoot, like, we don't want to lose him, so we have to elevate him. Like I said, generally there's a slight gentleman's agreement between a third practice squad quarterbacks. You don't see it a ton unless a team is ravished, and they will give him a start. That's different. If someone's ready to give Shane Buechele a start, that's completely different. But generally, you're not going to pluck another team's QB2 to make him your QB2 very often. The Bills would probably counter by elevating him. But outside of that kind of situation, I don't know that the Bills would make that swap, only because now Kyle Allen's contract's guaranteed, and there's some things with that. Once you make the week 1 roster, there's some intricacies where the Bills aren't floating with the billions of dollars here. They still have to kind of watch it on a cap end, not a cash end. They're fine on a cash end. So it's just a matter of they got to kind of think about those kind of things. And it did come down to the boogie. You want to get in the D line here in a bit. It did kind of come down in that decision too, when you had to look at the cap of these individuals. And Shane Buechele is probably just going to stick on the practice squad for now. And you'll see with the quarterback 3 rule, I'm not exactly sure how that's going to work, because you're allowed to have one because of the San Francisco rule. We don't want to see running backs and receivers playing quarterback in the playoffs. It's not good for the league, even if the rest of your team's super good. It's not good. It's not a good product. So you still rather see Shane Buechele over that situation. So I'm not exactly sure if the third quarterback can be on your practice squad or if they have to be on your active roster, but they're allowed to be active every game regardless of the inactive. So you're allowed to use that to your advantage. So I'm assuming that the quarterback is going to be an elevation every week because it's free. So I don't know exactly how that's going to play out. So a player and Buechele will probably get elevated because he won't cost you to activate and have on your bench with a jersey on. So that will limit you, though, if he's not. So the negative to that, Pat, will be you can only call up one other guy now. Instead of Isabella and Kirksey, you can only pick one. If the quarterback is not on your active roster and they're sitting on your practice squad, because you're going to need to bring them up. So we'll see. The Bills will need to make a decision at some point that they're going to either need to elevate Isabella, they're going to either elevate Kirksey, or elevate Buechele at some point in the next 3 weeks. So we're going to have to see how that plays itself out. Probably Kirksey is the winner of those 3, I would assume. And I guess you're going to keep elevating Buechele, but he's going to run out of elevations week 4. So it's an interesting predicament.
And like, I know you said that you don't know truly how that rule works. So is it going to be like is it 100% 2 call-ups no matter what? Or are they going to give you that like, is it 2 plus 1?
That's the thing we don't know yet. Okay. So we do know he can be active with a roster jersey for free. We don't
Right.
know if now they're not going to let you probably abuse it with him on your practice squad though. So if he's sitting on your active roster, like the Chiefs did last year with Buechele, he's allowed to get a jersey for free. No issues. No, you don't have to use an inactive. He gets a jersey, and you only need to have 6 inactives at that point. So it's just a matter of if you're going to put him on your practice squad, though, they're probably still going to enforce 3 call-ups, though. They're probably still going to say, we're already giving you the benefit of having him active. If you want him week 4, he's going to have to be rostered. So
Gotcha.
I think you'll see him in the first 3 weeks activated or not, or the Bills might risk it and still have 7 inactives on game day and not elevate him up and use him later on. But I think with a free player, I do envision him being active on game days in the first 3 weeks. But if they want to call up Isabella and they want to call up Kirksey, he's not going to get the call up. So it's as simple as that. And then in those situations where they want those 2 guys active, then you're certainly not going to get you're going to get 8 offensive linemen because they can't possibly have all those active game day jerseys. So it's going to get interesting here. The Bills are a talented practice squad. And now with Buechele down there, do they utilize that third quarterback rule? I just find it kind of weird that they wouldn't, because generally speaking, you do. So going to have to find out how that all plays out over the next 2 weeks.
And before we do get to the defensive line, one of the things that I found interesting, speaking of offense and call-ups and everything like that, is the Bills only went with, technically they went with 6, but they ended up with 5 receivers because they put Shorter on the IR. So does that, at least until Kirksey gets up, or, Buechele, do they leave him down just like you were saying? What kind of, do you think that they prioritize having that 6th receiver on the roster or on the game day roster over having, say, Kirksey, or if you're going to call up that third quarter or the third quarterback? Or do you think that they're going to more prioritize the linebacker position and the wide receiver rather than the quarterback?
They would have rostered Isabella if they were worried about the 6, because they knew Shorter was a paper transaction. So really it was 6, but it was really 5. The Bills knew right off the bat it was 5. Based on the way they constructed their roster, it was 5. If they were nervous about it, then you would have probably called Isabella up instead of Ifedi, or made another move. So I think the tell was that. I don't necessarily think they will do that. Now, it's possible, but I don't know. I mean, Shakir was safer and has more of a secure role on the team than maybe we were thinking later on in the year in this preseason. So I do believe all 5 of those guys are active on game day. And I don't think there's a 6 wide receiver spot to make active right now, even if you called up Isabella. They have 4 guys down there. And if they called up a guy, it might not be a guy we're all thinking. It could even be like a Brian Thompson, because he's a good gunner. He was a guy that was rumored to have maybe made the team. And that was, I got some news from that early on, Cord Cut Day, and I was like, oh gosh, that would have been caught us all out of left field. But they do feel good enough with their gunner situation with Saran Neal, Cam Lewis, and others there in that situation, rather than having to Brian Thompson. So we'll see. We'll see exactly. With Shorter out, he was said to be involved with a lot of special teams packages. So we'll see exactly. So that might be a more seamless transition to like a Brian Thompson being called up. We'll see. I think they go with 5 on game day. They just don't have enough jerseys to give out. And I think they still utilize the Shane Buechele call up, but we'll have to see if it's week 1, but they'll definitely utilize that shortly into the season.
So, and then my other question on the wide receiver room, because you brought up Shakir, he just came back from the rib injury to practice. Do you think that is he well enough where he's going to be active week 1, or is he going to be maybe inactive week 1 to finish healing those ribs?
It's possible that's where you'd get an Isabella call up. But no, by all accounts and from what I've heard, he's healthy now and definitely will be in 10 more days. So
that's definitely good news.
So that would be a strategic move. Don't believe it would be a rib move if for some reason you wanted to go with Isabella in these situations. Bills love their 2 call-ups each game. And it's going to be interesting to see if they start with using one of them with Buechele. That's one of the biggest question marks to me right now. If the league's going to give you a third call-up, if it's only a quarterback, I don't believe they would, because they're already giving you the benefit of the extra roster jersey. on game day. So Bills can basically elevate him and give him a jersey and not affect the rest of the roster, if that makes any sense. You can call him up, give him a jersey, and not have to scratch anybody from your game day. So that's a benefit alone, that you don't have to mess with any other portion. You can call him up and give him a jersey. So you can't do that with any other position. If you called up Isabella, you have to make someone else has to be inactive on game days. So I think that they'll utilize that. But I could be wrong if there's a strategic move to need Isabella for something, to need Kirksey for something. I'm interested to see Thursday in a week from today with opening kickoff, what these teams are what their inactives are going to look like. Because generally it's not really a big deal, but now I'm kind of watching out for this weird third quarterback rule. Because a lot of teams, like, just pull the Jets, and they have Aaron Rodgers and Zach Wilson on their roster. They don't have a third quarterback. So will they call up Tim Boyle? I'm not really sure exactly how it's going to play itself out here on opening week, because it seems like almost everybody, like look at the Chiefs. The reason Bouchel's available is because they went with Patrick Mahomes and Blaine Gabbert, and then Chris Aludicon as their third guy now. I'm not exactly sure how it's going to play out, but I'm very interested to see the Chiefs inactives just to see how this all plays out.
Chiefs and the Lions as well.
Sure.
So as far as that goes, I mean, we're going to get into the defensive line now, and my first question to you is, who do you see coming off the roster when they activate Vaughn?
That's a good question. The Bills, Brandon Beane went up there yesterday and said he did not want to expose Kingsley Jonathan to waivers. And that led to the savings of some cap from Boogie Basham, and go with Kingsley Jonathan. I don't think that changes in week 5. And then Brandon Beane also said he's not getting this ramp up week that everyone's kind of predicting. We do expect him in London. And I do believe that. And at least in the path, you're going to London. He's going to want to be there with his team. You're going to want to put him out in pass rush situations. At some point, he was close to being ready now. So at some point, this is the period he's ramping up. This is the period that he's watching his knee and his other ligaments. He's getting this month now to kind of ramp that up, not when he's activated. When he's activated, he did mention that you can come off right before the week. So probably right before week 4. I don't know the exact date they're going to let him come off and actually practice in pads. But I expect to see him in a little bit in week 5. Now, who do they cut? I think that they're thinking could be an easy move at the IR, going 5 weeks at that stage. Will there be someone you can put on IR? Odds are likely that unfortunately one player, whether it's a special teamer or somebody, could need to go on IR. If not, they're going to have to send somebody, a vet. Maybe they could go a vet route and see if they can add him back to the practice squad. But Matt, the thing to remember about vets, their contracts are all guaranteed across the league, regardless of how their contract's structured, week 1 on opening day. So the Bills are still looking at the cap right now where they can't just cut Shaq Lawson. They're going to owe him all of his money. They can't then cut him and elevate, put in more salary with Vaughn. So it's going to be tricky. The move is probably a young player. It's probably having to expose Kingsley Jonathan to waivers, unless he looks too good in the first 4 weeks, and then the Bills have a good problem that they need to worry about. So it'll be interesting what they do at that stage. And right now, I don't have the answer. You're heavy at corner. Will they send a Cam Lewis through? Will Saran Neal still make sure he has his job? The Bills can do a few things there, but maybe an O-lineman has to go. But ultimately, I think you're looking at Kingsley Jonathan. But if he's good enough, if he doesn't show anything, week 5, it's unlikely a team would claim him unless they're ravished. The Bills sent Isaiah Hodgins through waivers last year and he cleared. And then they were thinking, well, at this stage of the season, who's going to claim him? The Giants were ravished with wide receiver injuries, and they claimed him at that stage. So even the Giants themselves didn't claim him through the original set of waivers. The Bills elevated him to their roster with injuries early on after Jamison Crowder. So, Matt, it's going to be tough, but I think ideally you're looking at Kingsley Jonathan to send through waivers. I still think he'd get claimed, though. So I think the Bills are thinking that we'll play this day to day. If there's an injury, it makes sense. If not, the team's fully healthy, which is a good thing. They do have a sticky situation there. They do have a sticky situation to where someone like Quentin Morris could make sense because his contract's not guaranteed in terms of his vested and the way his contract's written. So we'll have to see exactly what the Bills will want to do there, but it does get kind of squirrely with what they're going to do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And as far as, I'll let Pat go because I know he had some questions on Kingsley Jonathan and Boogie Basham trade and things like that. So I'll let him ask you.
Well, my question before that was, Kevin, when do you think we could expect a full Von Miller workload? Would that be week 6, 7, possibly 8?
Full reps?
Yes.
I don't think too far into the season. I think week 6, you'll see a full rep Von Miller. I think week 5, you'll see a limited rep Von Miller. I would not be shocked by a fair workload in week 5. I really wouldn't, only because of how close he was in these first 4. I do think ideally he'd be on the roster, and ideally he'd be ready week 3 for a limited reps, week 4 ramp up, week 5 full go. But the Bills wanted to give him this extra month. They wanted to stash Kingsley Jonathan. I think the Bills are going with like a middle approach. They're not going with a get him on the field today, but they're also not going with we'll see him for the playoffs is all that matters. Like, yes, that is all that matters, but you got to get there in a very competitive AFC. We're taking a lot for granted when people say something like, well, just play him in December. Well, sure, in an ideal world, 100%. I think all of us on this would agree with that. Got to get to December, and you need to be in position to where that makes sense. And the Bills, if they run into any pass rushing issues early on, they're going to want Von back very soon with reps very early on this season if the defensive ends aren't getting there. So it's very easy to say, I hope he doesn't play till December 21st. Like sure. A, you're paying him a ton of money. B, it's just like saying anything. We don't need Diggs until it matters. Like, yeah, you do.
I mean, we did see the huge drop off there. I mean, we went from third in pass rush win rate, and we were third in the league, and we dropped down to 13th when Von went off the field. So it's tough because you want to have that presence off the edge, and because not even for him to get stacks, but for him to push guys into other guys, and somebody up the middle, whether it's now Poona Ford, whether it's now Daquan Jones at Oliver, those guys are gonna trade off sacks, and I think this defensive line is going to be very good this year.
Yeah, it sure is. And there were some stats that showed that in the playoffs, it was actually pretty good. You wouldn't guess it. But in the playoffs, I have a lot of metrics that point to the pass rush win rate was good. AJ Epinesa was good. There were some games after Von that didn't look great. But it's funny because a lot of the individual win rates and a lot of their pressure statistics and different metrics were good. So the Bills are going to say, we ran into some hard luck there. With some of the metrics didn't convert like they should have, but in the playoffs they started to. So believe it or not, they were actually pretty good in the playoffs from the Miami to the Cincy game. It wasn't the defensive line's fault. You would think it was because of no pressure on Joe Burrow, but there was really some defensive back issues against Cincy. They didn't read certain coverages right. Even Poyer was making up. There's so many checks at the line of scrimmage, more than normal. And just in the snow, it just didn't work out. But realistically, Greg Rousseau had a great game against Cincinnati. They were really good against Miami. The defense was actually lights out against Miami, regardless of the score. DVOA, pretty much every metric shows that 99% win probability per your guy on DVOA in that Miami game. So there was really never at harm's way, even though it could have felt like it at times. Statistically, Brandon Beane would tell you, really was never in everything went wrong, and they still won with a 99% win probability against Miami. So they probably felt pretty good in that. So yes, it wasn't great with Von, but individually, like, you're pointing to some things that were good. Defensive tackle kind of was an issue. You lost Daquan Jones in the Cincy game, and just too much. It was too much loss. Yeah. That was the final straw. It just wasn't enough defensive talent in that game. And then it hurt Jordan Phillips, and he really didn't have much. He had like Shaq Lawson and Greg Rousseau and Ed Oliver, and really that was about the extent of the remaining defensive line. It's really good right now. Kingsley Jonathan adds another factor. A healthy AJ Epinesa is good. The defensive tackle room is looking very solid. So
a healthy
everybody's saying, yeah, Ed Oliver back, Leonard Floyd. So it is a much upgrade. Everyone's like, it's going to be the same Bills defensive line. Not really. They've pretty much rotated through half their new defensive line. So I'm excited to see that. But I still do not buy the rest your good players because it doesn't matter mindset. The only way you're in line to have a good path to win this thing, you got to win regular season games, as dumb as that sounds, in order to make sure your path is better. If the Bills would have, secured that 1 seed last year, the path is completely different. Then you have Cincinnati against Kansas City. Who knows where that goes in that game? And then the next week might be a little bit better weather, and Kansas City has to come to Buffalo, and you never know how that could go with Mahomes on the road where he's never really had to play. So it's just completely different. It's all circumstantial. It's tournament football, and to get in the best tournament bracket, you need to make sure you're winning these games. And I'm sorry, you can't just throw away games. A healthy Josh Allen doesn't fumble that ball in Minnesota, and they're the 1 seed. So I don't want to hear about like this situation where don't play Vaughn because he doesn't only matter until January. Yeah, you want him to be on the field in January. You got to be in a position to where you're not playing for your football life to even win the division or a playoff spot. You want to be in a situation to where you can scale him down a little bit in December because, you're playing Miami and it doesn't really matter, or a situation like that. You want that. You don't want the situation where he's healthy and full and fresh in December, needing to make big plays to keep the Bills in a division spot.
No, I mean, I'll just real quickly speak on the Bengals game. I mean, when we had Jim McNally on, earlier this year, I mean, he even said they were licking their chops as soon as they found out that Daquan Jones was out. And so they were able to run it right down, our defensive tackles. So
yeah,
it's tough, but at that point we ran out of luck, if for lack of better terms, at that point, with everything else that happened last year. So Pat, I know you had a couple more questions here.
Well, yeah, my first question was, Kevin, did Boogie Basham have like no trade value for what we received for him?
Look, so part of what you see around the league, and what's funny enough with like Jonathan Taylor, is them getting outlandish, asking for like other teams receiver 1s and receiver 2s and getting crazy, is that people know you're trading him. And when you're in that situation, like, look, the Bills, like other teams, and probably the Giants more than anybody, knew that like you like Kingsley Jonathan. I know you're not exposing Kingsley Jonathan. Like I just have this feeling you're not going to waive him. So what are you going to do? So I'd have a feeling you're going to need $1 million cap savings to keep Kingsley Jonathan. So you're going to cut Boogie Basham. Like we know what you're going to do. And that was evident in the trade package. So unfortunately, Shane, the Bills, look, they gave him away. Basically, the trade up isn't even a thing. Like the trade, yes, I'll make the argument that even 50 picks from the 7 to the 6 is statistically better to make the roster. The Bills cut their 7th round pick. So there is a little bit to that. Those, don't forget the compensation picks that sit at the end of a 6th round. So you do jump up all throughout there. And if the Giants are middle of the road, you do jump up from your late 7th round pick, basically close to Mr. Irrelevant, to a pick, could be 60 picks higher. So it's a little bit more than people think, but at the same, and then that starts to get into range where the Bills might roster that player as compared to they just, look, Alex Austin and Nick Broker are now on the Texans. The Bills have had the most players claimed, 16 in the league. So at some point they just can't roster that 7th round pick in 2 years. So it is a little bit better than you would think, but at the same time, they took his contract on, which wasn't crazy high. Next year, they probably did need to shed some money from there. This year, it was negligible. Next year, it was like a $2.5 million savings. So that's something that they now don't have. There's now no dead cap hit on. So there is a little bit of monetary savings the Bills have there. They got a little bit of sugar on the draft pick. But yeah, Patrick, his value was not high. He wasn't very good. Regardless of, if you hear people say, like, there was nothing there. He didn't fit the scheme. He's playing outside linebacker right now. I've heard this talk that he's going to go get 7 sacks there. No, he's not. He's playing behind Kayvon Thibodeau. I don't know how much he comes out of the game in the first place. You're going to see him in certain sub packages, maybe on rundowns. He showed some stuff. He doesn't get after the quarterback. He's not going from that to that. Maybe he's effective setting the edge. I think he's going to have like a Shaq Lawson style of career. It's not a bad buy low for the Giants. I just don't see anything there from him. And if he doesn't perform this year, he's a free cut for them next year too. So we'll see exactly how that all plays out. But yeah, he did not have value. Same reason that teams were balking at Jonathan Taylor. And then DeAndre Hopkins earlier this year, teams were like, you're cutting him. Like, why am I trading you anything? I'm not doing a draft swap with you. You're going to cut him unless you eat his monies, which by all accounts, I've heard that the Bills wanted to do was they were very interested if the Cardinals would eat money. At that stage, it would have been a different ballgame. They were willing to swap picks. The Bills were willing to trade down, by my sources, because they didn't think Dalton Kincaid would be there. They wanted Arizona to eat his cap space, and they were willing to do a little bit. If they were going to get DeAndre Hopkins basically for free, that's very valuable to them. But as the cap got to 10, 12, 13, $15 million, just didn't have it, and they had to bow out of that situation. Similar here with Boogie Basham. Teams are like, whatever, we're not going to give you a fifth or a fourth because you're going to cut him. So I think truly maybe AJ Epinesa had the value, and teams are like, we trust you're going to keep him. We're not, we want a 7-sack guy. He's proven to be able to his numbers, his analytics are good. He's proven to be able to get after it regardless, once again, of what people think. So I think that's where teams were willing to trade a 4th-round pick, and the Bills are like, nah, we see some pass rush value there. He does something differently than Shaq Lawson, who's really good against the run. So at this stage, we're going to keep a guy and then Leonard Floyd can do both pretty well. So they were like, we want to keep the true pass rushers in Kingsley Jonathan and in AJ Epinesa. We're more than willing to trade Boogie Basham, but we're not going to feel the need. We think it makes our team worse to get that 4th-round pick from AJ Epinesa.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, I definitely, seeing what the compensation was and everything, I really feel like it was, the Giants being like, hey, and the relationship there with Joe Shane and Brian Daboll, they basically just gave them to him and swap picks. It helps the Bills out, helps the Giants out, gets them a guy behind Thibodeau and things like that. So, and then Pat, I know you had one more question or 2 more questions for Kevin.
Yes, I have one more. My next question is, Kevin, what have you seen from Kingsley Jonathan this preseason?
Oh, just a relentless motor. I mean, he has a chance to be in this league. We'll see. Maybe he proves me wrong, but he has a chance to be in this league and be an effective speed pass rusher. He gets after it. His RAS score was in the 8s and the 9s in most categories. He does it all. If he was like a little bit taller, he would have been drafted. He's a little bit older of a prospect coming out of Syracuse. That was also what you saw from him. 9.04 RAS, was extremely athletic at most spots. Really, his biggest knock on his RAS score was his height, as mentioned. 28 bench press reps, jumped 34.5 for a guy his size. Is pretty impressive. 270 pounds now, playing in the NFL. So ran, and then the number one thing that jumps out to me, never was a 40-yard dash, even though that's nice. A 1.61 10-yard split means he can beat a tackle at this level. The Bills saw that. So did the Bears, claiming him, and the Bills were blessed that he ended up getting back on the waiver market and being said yesterday he's not going to let him go. So he's going to be a guy that I don't know if there's enough jerseys for him right now, Patrick. I don't know if they're with the guys we were just talking about in the last segment, bringing up and stuff. I don't know if he can see a jersey, but I would not be shocked if he does. I would not be shocked if the Bills see something in his pass rushing ability that they're going to give him a jersey, because he's going to, at least while Vaughn is down, they're going to be able to utilize that. So it's going to be interesting. It'll be game to game. If they don't think a team throws a lot, I don't think you'll see him get a jersey. But a team that maybe like the Jets, you would see him active, maybe not against the Raiders or the Texans or Washington. But I think that you would see him with an active jersey against teams that throw, like the Chiefs, like the Bengals, maybe the Packers. I'm not sure what teams think of the Packers. They don't play the Packers this year, but if they did, that would be an interesting one to me because they run the ball so well. So it's interesting. Then you got teams like the Vikings. They don't also play, obviously, but those mixed teams is what I'm getting at here. You're not really sure what you would do with like a Kingsley Jonathan, but our version of that on the roster is the Jets. Do they have him active against Aaron Rodgers? That's going to be the interesting move here. I would give him a jersey, but where does the spot come from? I'm not sure. That's why I still lean to calling up Buechele, so that you have the quarterback all secured in an emergency situation. But then somebody like Kingsley Jonathan would get a jersey. So I think I'd rather have Kingsley Jonathan with the jersey than Andy Isabella. So I guess that's what I'm getting at here. But that by saying that and just calling up Kirksey. So it's going to be tough to give these guys jerseys. And I think that Kingsley Jonathan has proven to get one. But if the team's fully healthy, there's not much they can do. I think you might see like Dorian Williams maybe without a jersey if he's still going through that calf. And that's how you call it Kirksey. So it's going to be Really, really weird to watch them put this roster composition together. But I would give Kingsley Jonathan a roster spot on game days because I think he just adds another wave of this pass rush. But will they? Maybe they won't because they want to sneak him through waivers in 4 weeks. I don't know exactly what they're thinking, but I think that they want to see what he can do in a 20 snap situation. While tackles are tired deep in the game and pass rushing situations when he's not going to get any attention. Where you might throw the attention to Rousseau or Floyd on the other side with Oliver and Rousseau on the other side, might get the attention. And then, Kingsley Jonathan's one-on-one with a bad Jets offensive line. So that's kind of what the theory is to me. And I think he's done enough to get pass rushing snaps.
No, absolutely. And I know we got a question from one of our guys from the network from the Undercovers cast, Tommy. He's just asking you, Benford, do you think he starts at cornerback too?
I think he should. I think he will. But I'm still not going to be shocked to see Dane Jackson roar out there week 1. I think it's going to be situational, and McDermott has led to it many times where, who's the best fit to cover Allen Lazard. And I think that's who's going to get the number 2 corner job week to week. They like Kaiir Elam against like the Tyreek Hills of the world. So maybe he'll get a Miami Dolphins game. But in this situation with Lazard, you want the most physical guy. He does not do well with a physical press. He does not do well getting locked up like that. He's known to not overly win in those situations. And he does have some drops too, kind of similar to maybe Gabe Davis on our side. So I think you're going to want to get up there and get in there. And it could be Christian Benford in this case, or they could go with the solid Dane Jackson. To me, I would go with Benford in this situation. I thought he locked it up, but the Bills not giving it to him after the game and it right now does kind of still show me that they are still leaning Dane Jackson unless it's a pure strategic move where they don't want to say. But we're talking corner 2 here. Like, you're not giving a ton away. But look, even Tyreek Hill says, I go on Madden to see their ratings. And that's silly. But it's a silly way to do it. He says he doesn't watch film, but he watches their Madden awareness. But at some point, there is still strategy, even at corner 2, to not tell who it is. I just don't know how much beneficial that is. But it's enough for the Bills to say, you don't know who's going to start at corner 2 until Monday night.
So do you think that Elam has any shot at making that to play against more of the press man type things where we know Dane Jackson's more your zone cover, Benford's gotten better at press, but he's more of like your zone. So do you think Elam has a chance to play against like somebody like a Lazard? Or
in theory, he should, but I don't think you will see it early in the year. I think he's going to be a guy that is going to benefit from someone struggling, unfortunately, in front of him, or maybe an injury situation. But I don't think you'll see him get that. And now it's going to struggle to get him a jersey, and it's going to make fans mad. I don't know where the jersey comes from him because they're going to give it to Cam Lewis. Mm-hmm. So and Siran Neal. So I don't know where his jersey comes from, if we're being honest. It just is what it is. But one of the 3 of them can't get a jersey, purely numbers game, because one of them's already a rotational backup in that role. So really, Benford's going to be active. So really, it's between Dane and Kaiir. So I don't know. I think that the Bills will go Dane. I wouldn't be shocked with either of them. You can clip this being inactive on game day in a week and a half. One of them will not be in a Bills jersey. So that I do feel pretty confident in. I don't know who it'll be, but if it is Kaiir active, that's a good sign that you'll see him. So, because he doesn't really play a lot of special teams. So if he's active, the Bills feel like he's going to get some reps in that game. Mm-hmm. Will they go and scratch Dane Jackson, Matt? I don't know.
And that's the thing that, especially from what I see, is they don't have a lot of weapons on the Jets either. They literally have Wilson, they have Lazard, they have Cobb, and a Breece Hall that is coming off an ACL injury. They do have a slowed down Dalvin Cook. So Uzama at tight end, who is really needing to be covered? I mean, and I'm saying this kind of facetiously, but I feel like all our cornerbacks, whether you sit one down or not, can cover those guys, especially because you throw Taron Johnson in there too.
Yeah, and I have no problems with Taron Johnson and Randall Cobb. They're going to do some goofy things with Mecole Hardman. He's never really gotten it going yet in his career. Losing Corey Davis was my threat. He beats the Bills, whether he was in Tennessee or his limited time in the Jets.
Yep.
He kind of stuck it to them with the way he had a huge cap number. He could have just gotten cut and they would have saved a ton of money over there. But retirement leads to a sticky situation to where there's no retirement clause in a person's contract. You're paid like you are on the active roster or the IR. So it's very sticky in New York, the way that went down. Yeah, they are an injury away from being with either Lazard or Garrett Wilson to being in trouble. You're talking about a team that historically stays pretty healthy. Last year, their offense was banged up. Their defense was historically healthy. And the Jets claim they focus on it with the soft tissue research and all the stuff that Robert Saleh points to. So we'll see how they're able to keep that trend going and stay healthy. But they cannot afford injuries to that offense at all. Like anywhere across that offense, from the quarterback position to any of their spots on that. Maybe running back if they could maybe. But other than that, they could not handle an injury anywhere on that roster. O-line, tight end, receiver, quarterback. They cannot overcome it. On a team like the Bills, I do believe can overcome injuries, depending, obviously not to Josh, but to most other positions on the offense. Guard, I would feel okay with. Receiver, even if something happened to Hardy or Sherfield, they're okay. If something happens to Knox, I'm okay, at least short term. So, ultimately, the Bills' depth is great, as you've seen them get players claimed at 3 every single year, and 5 total are now for 5 players from the 90-man roster on other teams, by far the most in the league. So at some point, even Quisenberry was signed. So at some point, the roster is pretty deep, and the Jets I'm not too worried to watch Randall Cobb and Taron Johnson right now against each other. Trey needs to be Trey against Garrett, but the Bills, I don't know that they'll match up. They might keep boundary sides of the field. They might shade presence over to corner 2 if Garrett goes over there. Maybe, the general strategy is you absolutely lock down their second and third receivers, and then you give their number 1 receiver help. You'd rather take out that side of the field and game and then shade somebody over in a zone over to help out against Garrett Wilson. If that gets bad or that doesn't look right, then you may change that strategy. But the general philosophy there is you may see Trey on Allen Lazard to take him right out of the game. And maybe the Jets will take that too, taking the Bills corner 1 out of the game. They can look at it like that on their end. So it's kind of a chess match, but that's gotten pretty trendy where, you're going to take their one-on-one, take their corner or receiver 2 out of the game. Taron Johnson can hold down the nickel, and then you're just shading help to Garrett Wilson, more of a 2-on-1 situation, and then able to play 1-on-1 in zones across the field. So we'll see what Aaron Rodgers is going to be able to do. He was aided for some help on the opening drive and his touchdown drive, overthrew some players, didn't look great himself, and that O-line is just rocky, guys, over there in New York. Maybe they figure it out last minute with Dwayne Brown and Mekhi Becton, Elijah Vera Tucker, Connor McGovern, the other Connor McGovern, and Laken Tomlinson over there, but it's brutal.
It didn't look good.
Maybe it comes together.
It didn't look good. And Pat, what else you got for Kevin before? Because we're coming up on the hour here. We can go a little bit longer, but definitely want to get Kevin out of here.
Well, Kevin, my last question for you is: you got a hot take for us for the game coming up
of the Bills-Jets game?
Yes.
My hot take is on the other side of the ball, where I think the Bills' offensive line will look better than everyone thinks. I think the interiors where they struggled mightily, that led to bad play by Brown with his injury, and it just didn't look good. Pressure up Josh Allen's face is not good. And that's where you start to see him get squirrely. I do think Josh preferred and set assets and money to the interior. Please, we need to have Chris Jones. We need to have Christian Wilkins. We need to have, everybody that rushes from the interior, which is getting better and better. We need them all blocked up. Please, let's solidify that. And I can get around. I can see the right side of, I roll to the right. I can beat almost any right defensive end in the league, left defensive end on defense. I can beat anybody around the right edge. It's my strength. So if I'm making $45 million and I'm a top 3 quarterback, I need to be able to, you don't have the cap space to dedicate to every single position. Please don't put Rusher in my face again. And I think that may have been the conversation that Josh Allen had with his offensive line coach, thus, and the general manager. So you saw it pretty clearly, and evidence is that that's what they did, and kind of copying the Chiefs model because their interior is amazing. It's the best in the league. Their tackles are average, and they lost Orlando Brown. Most metrics still point to their tackle play being average. It's not great, but it's covered up by how good the interior of their offensive line is. And I think that the Bills want to do the same thing. They want to have a rock solid interior. O'Cyrus Torrence is going to bring that. Connor McGovern's look good. And David Edwards might look like the signing of the year at his $1.7 million because he came in and there was no downfall with David Edwards. And he probably is, he's not only Torrance has beat out Bates, but so is David Edwards has probably beat out Bates, definitely at the left guard spot. So that's what the interesting note is, Patrick, that I think my hot take is that Bills, I hear about this Jets defense, and they were historically healthy last year, and they were playing some backup quarterbacks, and they were against some bad offensive lines. I want to see what this Jets, you have, will their Carl Lawson play? He's still coming back from an injury, how good he's going to look. They're going to rely on Jermaine Johnson and Will McDonald, a couple first-round picks in back-to-back years. I'm not overly concerned with Michael Clemens and Bryce Huff and John Franklin Myers, Al Woods and Solomon Thomas, Quentin Jefferson. I'm not really that concerned with that list of guys, as long as they can keep cue ball in check. So that's the number one thing. And that's where, once again, the Bills wanting to increase their interior presence. The interesting question to leave you guys with is, are they comfortable with like a 90% McGovern, or are they going to go with 100% David Edwards? I don't know that answer at this time. It's going to be interesting to see how close to 100. As he gets closer, it's going to go to McGovern. But if he's still 90% or less, I think you see David Edwards week 1 until he's 100% for week 2 or 3.
And my last question that I ask everybody, Kevin, record prediction for the Bills this year.
I'm on the more positive end because I think that anybody that sees the roster, it's really good. Analytically, they're really good. They're projected to win about 12 games, even with this tough schedule. And everyone's like, the schedule's so hard. Hear that every year almost sometimes. So, the Rams are supposed to be, really good coming off and then now in hindsight, you can say something like, no, they were terrible. Stafford was hurt. That's really simple to say now. But I have the Bills winning. I'm still in the camp that they win 12 games, even with this schedule. I live off of analytics, and I don't have anything that says that they're going to go 13. But I think it is hard enough to where they are going to slide in right at that 12. They're going to win the AFC East. And I think the AFC beats up on each other, though. I don't think there's going to be a runaway of 15-win team this year. I think it'll come down to the 12-win teams with these tiebreakers, and that's why you need to win those games that you play those other top teams. The Bills have done pretty well in those top games, but man, they just always seem to be a game off in these situations. So I have them winning, going 12-5. I think they start really hot, and what's needed to calm the nerves. But they do have a harder schedule in the second half, but it's not crazy. They start 7-1. It's really not that crazy. 6-2 is probably pretty realistic to start the season, even not looking great. So I think that's ultimately what I envision happening in this season as you kind of look through the schedule. But I mean, really until that Bengals game on NBC on 11-5, they should win every game prior to that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. They definitely should. And, I do want to thank you for coming on, Kevin. I do want to definitely tell everybody to check out the Going Deep podcast. Definitely check out Cover One. And anything else you want to plug, Kevin, before we get out of here?
No, Tuesdays at 7. You know where to find us. Always fun to come on your show, Patrick. You guys do a great job. I enjoyed your show with the DVOA creator and his new home over there. So it's exciting to see that he had the Bills in his prediction. But I think take it easy as Bills fans. Like I just said, that schedule does not get hard, and it doesn't really get hard until the last 6 weeks. You got an Eagles, Chiefs, Cowboys, Chargers, Patriots, Dolphins finish. That's challenging. But prior to that, after the Bengals game, you still have a home Broncos, you still have a home Jets. Those are still games you really should be. I mean, no worse than 9-3 there. Yeah. Like you really shouldn't. Like you really should come through like in okay shape. 9-3, 10-2. So to give you some affordability down the stretch in those huge games. So I think you'll see a hot start from the Bills. Don't get alarmed if they lose some games in late November, early December. Even Mahomes drops some games, but the Bills do tick on all cylinders in December. They do drop a game or two in November, but they generally are playing some really good football because they can overcome injuries, and not every team can. So stay healthy. This offensive line is going to be good. Don't worry about anything. I think they'll figure out linebacker. And as long as they can keep this injury bug away, and they kind of paid the piper last year, I think that they lost a lot of war to injury last year. So I think that they'll be in okay shape.
And I want to leave you with one thing before you get out of here, Kevin. So we've seen all the mainstream sports media, and I'm getting sick of it. But all I want to say to the Bills going into this season is use one of my favorite lines from Remember the Titans: "Run it up and leave no doubt." Just screw everybody else and leave no doubt. Who cares at this point? Because all they do is talk. All it is talk, and go out and prove it to the fan base, to the NFL, and put everybody on notice that when you come into Buffalo, when they come into there, we're running over you. So with that being said,
I'm not picking over Josh Allen, Matt. That's my final thought too.
Yeah.
I just think it's crazy.
No, absolutely. And I do want to thank you for coming on again. Definitely check us out at the Buffalo Basement Podcast on Twitter and on YouTube. Check out Kevin Tuesdays at 7 p.m. on the Going Deep podcast, and everybody else at the Cover One Network. Definitely thank you for coming on, and we will talk to you all next week.